Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Wednesday, March 13th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta. And joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor, Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And writer, Chris Evangelista.
Hello, folks.
So today it was revealed that Twitter is going to get rid of the likes and the retweets. Chris, how do you feel about that?
This is a dumb idea for many reasons. I can't imagine who this is for because, I mean, personally, I hate it, but I know that like quote unquote brands will not like this because all they care about are, engagement. They care about tweets and they care about likes and retweets. So I can't imagine anyone is going to be happy about this. I don't really know. It just sounds like Twitter is trying to turn into Instagram, which is just stupid because we already have Instagram.
Wait, but doesn't Instagram have likes?
They do, but the rest of these changes, they clearly point out that Twitter is focusing more on like the camera and photos because they basically just want to be Instagram. I think they're going to have like filters like Instagram has, which is also what Snapchat has. It's shit, basically.
Yeah. Brad, any insight on this? I know this isn't a movie topic, but I just read about this before we started recording, and I thought this was just such a horrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, I hate it too because I also like the self-gratification of seeing how many likes and retweets I get, especially if something goes, quote-unquote viral because, it's been retweeted a bunch of times by somebody, usually when Peter ends up retweeting something that we did through the Slash Film account.
But I do think, we will see those numbers. Like, the person posting will see these numbers, but other people won't see these numbers.
Yeah, I want other people to see how cool I am, too. That's what social media is about. Look at how cool I am.
Exactly, yeah. Like, I don't need self-satisfaction. I need everyone else to know how amazing I am and how beloved I am.
And then you get self-satisfaction from that.
Exactly.
I know. The next thing Twitter's going to do is remove follower numbers so that people can't see how popular you are.
Don't give them any ideas because they'll do that now.
Okay, let's talk about a story that broke yesterday. Yesterday I was away on a set visit, but I had an exclusive on the site, and this is an exclusive about a new Marvel Studios project they are developing with Disney Plus, the streaming service. Basically, they are going to be creating a TV series based on the What If comic book series. This is something I used to read as a kid, this comic book series. Would imagine alternate, worlds where different events happened. They would use it to tell literally impossible stories, like what if the X-Men had died on their first mission, or there would be fan service to solve like nerd arguments. So like, what if Venom possessed the Punisher? And the great thing about this series is it had like a lot of very insanely weird concepts. For example, what if Iron Man was trapped in the time of King Arthur? Or, what if the Fantastic Four was the Marvel bullpen? So that's basically like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and those guys. So it was really weird and strange. The cool thing about this, well, first of all, it's going to be an animated series. It's going to be an anthology series. So each episode is going to take on a new concept. The only one I know that's happening for sure is kind of an adaptation of one of the ones from the comics. And it's, what if Loki had found the hammer of, instead of Thor? So it'll give you alternate realities. They're going to, I think the plan is to have the actors who play these roles come in and voice the characters. So have Tom Hiddleston voice Loki. And, obviously, an animated film coming in and doing voice work, you can come in for a day, a few hours and get that done. So there's not much time commitment there. So that's why I think how they're going to accomplish that. But the cool thing here is I think it's going to be playing with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it's going to take events that we have seen over these 10 years of movies and present them in different ways. I don't know of any of the episodes that are in development other than the Loki one. But, what if the other half of the Marvel Universe disappeared or were dusted in Infinity War? Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like we're going to get like things like that. So Brad, I wanted to hear what your thoughts on this. Do you think this is a cool idea? Is this stupid? Do you have any interest, or it's just this is an animated series and it's not in continuity, so you don't care?
No, I think this is a very cool idea because I really enjoy the sheer concept of what if comics, taking these wild ideas that you would never really be able to pull off within the Marvel Comics universe or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, simply because it would upset the order of the story arcs that they have going on. So it allows you to explore these cool ideas as if you were playing, with these characters in your own sandbox. And I think doing it as an animated series allows them a lot more freedom to create something that is really stylish and cool, and it really taps into the potential and the limitless possibilities of what if stories, not unlike, something wildly new, bold and innovative like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse did. That was something that you probably could never really pull off in live action form. So taking these stories, putting them in animation, I think is a really good idea. I think there's a lot of potential here for something that's really fun, especially since a lot of these are just, one-off stories that don't have huge ramifications that you have to worry about impacting, the rest of a certain series or characters or anything like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of creativity to explore there. Chris, I know you are kind of getting tired of the Marvel movies. You're feeling the superhero fatigue, even though you loved, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is an animated film. Does this interest you at all?
Yeah, this sounds cool. I was a fan of the What If comics. I remember I had one when I was younger. It was called What If the Punisher Killed Spider-Man, and the whole comic was literally like the Punisher kills Spider-Man, and like the entire Marvel universe then turns on the Punisher and tries to kill him because they all love Spider-Man. And I love that, that opportunity. DC has their own sort of version with this, with the Elseworlds thing, where, it's like, what if Batman fought Jack the Ripper? And I just like that sort of thing where they take established stuff and do like really weird, far out stuff with it. And this is actually a really cool idea.
Yeah. I remember there was a comic book that was like, what if the Avengers had no one to fight? So it imagined a future where they had defeated all the bad supervillains, and they had to actually like find a normal way in society because there was nothing for them to do. So it has all kind of crazy things like that. I'm wondering how crazy it's going to get on Disney Plus. Like, do you think they'll do like, what if, one of our big beloved superheroes gets killed? Like, is that, I feel like they're going to go more family friendly.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like DC has been making animated movies that are like rated R, like they did the Killing Joke rated R movie, but I don't know what they're going to do with this. Yeah. They might not, just because it's Disney, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I've heard Kevin Feige is overseeing this, so I'm very excited, and I'm sure we'll hear more about this either in April during that meeting where they're going to show off all the Disney Plus stuff, or at Comic-Con in July. So look forward to that. While I was away yesterday, there was a big article talking about Sony's plans for the next 7 years of Spider-Man movies, TV shows, and I guess media crossing like universes. Chris, what do we know?
Yeah, everything is coming up Sony now. There was this period where it seemed like Sony didn't know what the hell they were doing, and they struck a deal with Marvel to bring Spider-Man into the MCU. But after Venom and after Into the Spider-Verse, they're feeling a lot more confident about their Spider-Man characters, and now that they have hundreds and hundreds of they have actually 900 Spider-Man adjacent characters to deal with now that they own the rights to. And after,
by the way, that is the scariest part of this article, is the quote that said, I think it was from one of the Sony executives, that said that they were exploring possible movies and TV shows based on all 900 of the Spider-Man adjacent characters that they have rights to.
That's right. So who knows? So this deal, basically Sony has it planned out for the next 7 years, where they're planning both films and TV shows. Of course, we already know there's going to be a Venom 2, and we already know they're making Morbius right now with Jared Leto, but they're all in on on going all out on their Spider-Man universe, or as they're calling it, Sony's universe of Marvel characters, which is very clunky, and they probably should have workshopped that title a little better. And there's a slight irony to this, because this is what Sony has been trying to do all along. You know, their whole plan when they rebooted Spider-Man with The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was to start this Spider-Man universe. You know, they had planned the Sinister Six movie, and that was actually set up at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But the problem was those films weren't that big. I mean, the first Amazing Spider-Man did well, but the second one did not do as well at the box office, and critics really didn't like it. And, you know, that whole concept of a big spider universe got trashed. But now it looks like they're going to try it again, and it seems like they have a better idea of how to go about it. Of course, we're saying that now, but the minute one of these films bombs, like the minute Morbius bombs, I'm not saying it will, but if it does, you know, I'm sure they're going to start reconsidering how they approach this.
I'm just worried with the success of Spider-Verse and the success of Venom that they're going to decide, you know, after this, you know, Far From Home, that they could, you know, take that version of Peter Parker and, run with it in their own way. Do you know what I mean? Like they could basically bring him into that Venom universe and all the other things that the Sony's producing, not with Marvel Studios proper. That's what I'm kind of worried about. I am excited about this animated Spider-Verse, like, you know, what Lord and Miller were able to create and design for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse with those three directors is amazing, and I'm hoping their ambitions aren't too lofty and isn't gonna, you know, I feel like once you like see that there's money in it, studios usually take the wrong path. Brad, are you still excited about this?
I mean, to a certain extent, sure. I think right now the only thing that I'm super excited about is what they do with the Spider-Verse universe and how they keep that going. Otherwise, I don't really care much about any of the other Spider-Man properties they're trying to turn into movies or anything like that. Like, unless it's Spider-Man as he relates to the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the new Spider-Verse animated films, I'm not interested in any of the other characters. It's going to take a lot of convincing for me to get there. And that's totally fine, because there was a time when we were all like, do we really need an animated Spider-Man movie? And look at where we are now. Yeah. So I'm very happy to be convinced that these movies are something that are worth paying attention to and seeing. But something like Morbius, like, honestly, I could take it or leave it. But if it turns out to be good, then I'll be the first one to, you know, say that I'm happy and pleased with it.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of on the same page here. Let's move on to Captain Marvel. I guess this is a spoiler for Captain Marvel. But originally, I mean, it has a post-credit sequence that, so if you have not seen Captain Marvel, maybe skip ahead a little bit here. It has a post-credit sequence that kind of like leads into Endgame, and we don't really have to talk about that too much here. But originally they had a different post-credit scene. Brad, what do we know?
Yes, we do have to touch a little bit about spoilers, because this post-credit scene does give us an idea of what happens to a certain character at the end of Captain Marvel. And the post-credit scene, one of the early ideas for it would have focused on Jude Law's character, Jan Rog. At the end of Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers apprehends him, restrains him, and puts him in one of the Kree spaceship pods, and or maybe it's one of the laboratory pods from Mar-Vell's ship. Either way, she throws him into a spaceship and sends him back to the Kree planet Hala to give them a message for her. And the last we see of Jan Rog is that ship blasting out of Earth into space. So we don't never know if he gets there or not. And a post-credit scene would have shown us that the pod crash lands on Sakaar, which is the wormhole-surrounded, basically junkyard planet run by Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster in Thor Ragnarok. So he would have crash landed there on his pod, gotten out, looked up and seen that giant wormhole called the Devil's Anus, and been like, where the hell am I? So that would have been a kind of a fun scene, but it also could have created some problems maybe with setting up a sequel or something like that, and they would have had to explain, how Yanrog got there or got back to Hala after that. So yeah, personally, I would have liked to have seen them do that scene, but also have him run into the Grandmaster, and maybe the Grandmaster gets a little saucy about seeing somebody like Jude Law on Sakaar, and either wants to turn him into one of the contenders for Continental Champions, or maybe get him involved in one of those crazy spaceship orgies that he has.
I that would have been fun. I feel like him just appearing there isn't good enough, but like you said, if he actually got to run in, have a interaction with the Grandmaster, that could have been a lot of fun. I do have a theory here. I have a crazy fan theory that, and I've talked about this on Twitter. I want to say this on the podcast just to have it out there, that the end credit scene that we saw in Avengers Infinity War was not originally intended for that movie. Now, the Russo brothers have said publicly that the Avengers Infinity War originally didn't have an end credit scene, that they shot that late into production. They wanted the movie to end with just, Thanos will return. And I know I asked Kevin Feige in my interview that played yesterday on the podcast if about that, and he kind of said it always had an end credit scene, and he kind of dodged the question. What I think actually happened is this. I think the end credit scene that was on Infinity War, that they added on because they needed something to kind of kill that downer of an ending. I think that was originally written for Captain Marvel. And let me lay out the point here. Right now, the way it plays is that end credit scene sets up the pager, and then, once we watch Captain Marvel, we see the pager, and it's almost like a prequel thing where we're like, oh, that's how she got the pager and whatever. But if it had if that scene, and by the way, that scene, obviously would have changed. It would have been a little different because it was shot by the Russos in the last days of the reshoots for Infinity War. That end credit scene. If it had played at the end of Captain Marvel, it would have played as kind of a tease for Avengers Endgame, right? Right now, spoiler alert for Captain Marvel, but the end credit scene for that movie now is kind of a scene from Avengers Endgame, kind of showing how, Captain Marvel appears there. And it actually kind of feels a little weird to me. I talked on the spoiler discussion about that. But Brad, I wanted to hear what your thoughts are on this. Like, do you think I'm insane, or do you think there could be something to this? Because if you also think about it, that scene, that Avengers Endgame scene, had both Nick Fury and, is teeing up Captain Marvel. That would have been a cool scene to have at the end of Captain Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been. I don't think you're insane necessarily, but I'm just not sure that it really accomplishes anything in a much better way than the current situated credit scenes did. Simply because, I feel like it would have been maybe a little bit, I don't know, jarring in some way to suddenly have a post-credit scene in Captain Marvel, which just took place in the 90s, time jump back to...
Well, that's what we do already.
I know, and I say that, but also I think having Captain Marvel pop up there, that's kind of like more of an exciting tease in a way, because it's the idea of Captain Marvel meeting the Avengers is something exciting as opposed to just like, he's calling Captain Marvel. So I don't know. I think it could go either way. It's definitely an interesting theory. Like I don't think you're crazy at all for having it, but I don't know. I think it worked out better the way they have it set up.
Fair enough. Let's talk about Annapurna. There is recent news that they're kind of losing a lot of money. Chris, what do we know?
Yeah, every year I hear the same thing from film fans. They say, why aren't there more original movies? Why is the film landscape only sequels and superhero movies and so on and reboots? And the reason is this: when original movies come out, no one goes to see them, and it's very depressing and disheartening. Case in point, Annapurna, who is one of the most interesting studios out there right now. I put them up there with like A24 in, the quality of stuff they put out. They had a great year quality-wise last year. They put out If Beale Street Could Talk. They put out Destroyer, Vice, The Sisters Brothers, and Sorry to Bother You. And in my opinion, all of those movies are either good or great. But out of that entire lineup, the only film that made money for them last year is Sorry to Bother You, and the amount it made is very, very minimal. Vice, for instance, lost about 15 to 20 million to the box office. Beale Street lost about 8 to 10 million. Destroyer lost 7 million, and the biggest flop of them all was The Sisters Brothers, which for some reason cost 38 million to make, which seems a bit ridiculous because it's a kind of a small movie, but it barely made 1 million at the box office. So it's really disheartening, as I said, because these movies are really good. These are original movies. They're movies for adults, but no one is checking them out. I don't know if it's just people aren't interested or if Annapurna's marketing team isn't that good. Like, Beale Street Could Talk should have been, a big hit in my opinion. Vice also should have been a big hit. Even though that's probably the most critically derided of all the films, that probably should have done well at the box office. It had a big cast. It had this big push for the Oscars, but I don't know what's going on here. But Annapurna is sort of in trouble, and I'm hoping they work it out because, like I said, they're responsible for some really great movies, and it would suck if they basically go under because no one cares.
It would. They do make great movies. I do kind of wonder, I know you're painting it as original pictures versus, big superhero films, but I do feel like a lot of what Annapurna produces is kind of outside of the norm. It's not just like an original thing, but it pushes your beliefs, and do you know what I mean? Like and it's very hard to market. Like, how do you market even Sorry to Bother You, which is the one success there? Like, I would think that would make the least because, like, how do you market that other than it has Tessa Thompson?
Yeah, and I say this in the story too that I never thought any of these movies would be blockbusters to begin with. These movies aren't. These don't sound like they're going to be big hits, but the fact that they're such big flops is, I think, like you would think they would at least break even, and they're not even doing that. So I don't know if it's a matter of just they're spending too much on the budgets or what, but there's some sort of disconnect going on.
I do feel like there's an opportunity here. Like, I feel like Fox Searchlight used to be the company that would make these small original films that were very accessible to the masses, and I don't feel like they're doing that as much anymore. They're kind of chasing award and critical acclaim. I feel like there's an opportunity here for Annapurna to kind of pick up that mantle, and like I feel like they just need to make more accessible original films. Like, is that bad for me to say, Chris?
I mean, I know what you're saying. I think that the answer is to balance it out, where they make accessible films, but they also are still willing to take risks with weirder stuff. Like, there needs to be sort of a give and take there.
Yeah.
I also think Fox Searchlight, for whatever reason, I don't necessarily know how, but they seem like they marketed their movies a little bit better. And Annapurna, they definitely know how to give the right vibe for their movies and sell what the movie really is. But I feel like maybe they're not pushing it to the right people or pushing it enough, or maybe they just don't have the budget to spend on marketing the movie as much. Because I think that's one of the reasons Fox Searchlight did so well with those kinds of movies, is because they knew exactly how to push them and get people into theaters to see them.
Guys, I have to stop this. We have some breaking news. It was just reported by Deadline that Shang-Chi, the Marvel Studios film, has found a director in Destin Daniel Creston. He is the filmmaker who did the acclaimed film Short Term 12 that played at Sundance years ago, starred Brie Larson, among many others. He also did a film called I Am Not a Hipster that played at Sundance, which I liked in 2012. And he has signed on to play this Marvel Studios film, which it sounds like this is probably going to be happening way sooner than I expected. Brad, what do we know about Shang-Chi?
We honestly don't know a lot about him. He's very skilled in martial arts. He's like one of the best, empty-handed fighters. He's been able to defeat several superhuman characters in the Marvel Comics universe, and apparently at some point he's exposed to some kind of radioactive material that allows him to create duplicates of himself, which is probably one of the cooler superhero things about him. Otherwise, this is probably the most obscure character that Marvel will be attempting to turn into a movie. But at the same time, since this is an Asian superhero, we could be looking at something here that fits more along the lines of a Black Panther, where we're introducing a diverse superhero. We're diving into uncharted territory as far as depicting a culture that we haven't really seen prominently in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So this is something that could be very cool for Marvel, and it could, give a character like this the spotlight, that a non-white superhero character deserves.
I was a big fan of Short Term 12, and that film kind of like launched the careers. I mean, I don't want to say launched because these people did have careers before then, but like everybody in that film now has like big careers. Brie Larson is in Captain Marvel. Rami Malek won an Oscar, and this was before Mr. Robot. Like Keith Stanfield, huge. Who else was in that? John Gallagher. This was before he kind of his rise. So that's a movie that you should go check out if you're just a fan of cinema. You should go check out Short Term 12. Chris, I'm wondering what you think of this, because this is this is the next in the line of Marvel tapping Sundance directors. They hired what's his name for Spider-Man?
John Watts.
John Watts, yeah, off of his film Cop Car that played at Sundance. Ryan Bowden and Anna Fleck, who obviously did a bunch of Sundance films for Captain Marvel. So, they're doing this guy. Like, what are your thoughts on Shang-Chi?
I know absolutely nothing about this character. I had to look it up. All based on Wikipedia. His one superpower is that he can create duplicates of himself. So I guess that's visually interesting. I don't know. I don't want to instantly knock this because I don't know anything about it, and it could turn out to be a great original thing. I do think.
What about the filmmaker, though? I mean, you've seen Short Term 12, right?
No, I actually have not seen that. Even though I always hear it's great, I just never got around to see it. That said, it's hard to get excited about these great indie directors because they end up getting swallowed up by the Marvel machine. Like Anna Bowden and Ryan Fleck, they've made some really great indie movies. I didn't think their direction on Captain Marvel was even like that memorable. It was very point and shoot, and I just feel like this happens a lot. It's very rare that an indie director breaks out within the world of Marvel. I think like Ryan Coogler is like the best example. So, but like I said, it's way too soon for me to judge this early. So, if it turns out to be a good movie, I'll like it.
Brad, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much right there with Chris too. I'll be, cautiously optimistic, waiting for our first glimpse of this movie. But like I said, I like the idea of Marvel expanding their roster to include a lot more diverse superheroes, especially when this is a superhero who kind of has a very dated history when it comes to how Asian culture was used during the character's prominence in like the 70s and 80s, relying on a lot of the familiar archetypes and troubling depictions we've seen of Asian characters back then. A lot of cliches and borderline racist depictions. Yeah. So I think if Marvel can take this character and turn it into something that can be a source of pride for Asians, a character that they can buy into and support and take inspiration from, then there's a lot of potential here. Yeah,
and it should be mentioned that this filmmaker was born in Hawaii, so he does have a little bit of that in his blood. He has worked. He produced with Michael B. Jordan. He produced that film. What it was called? Just Mercy, which I haven't seen. So there is some. I expect that this character will be completely reworked for the modern day audiences and not fall into those traps. But I'm excited, and it's interesting because I remember seeing photos from the Captain Marvel premiere last week or 2 weeks ago, and he was there, and I just assumed that he was there because Brie
He worked with
Larson.
Brie Larson, yeah.
But apparently, I'm sure a deal was in the works at that time already.
I just want to cut in here. I just checked, and Short Term 12 is streaming on Amazon Prime. So if you, like me, have not seen it, check it out. And I think I'm finally going to watch it now after all this talk.
Yeah, and that movie is kind of about a bunch of people who are working at a group home for at-risk teenagers, and this filmmaker based it after college. He worked college or high school, after graduating from something, he worked for a couple of years as a staff person at one of these, and he based a short film on that called Short Term 12, which played at Sundance in 2008, and he came back to the festival 5 years later with that film that I think got so much critical acclaim. So yeah, check it out on, you said Amazon Prime now?
Yes, streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
Okay. So that brings us to the end of today's Slash Film Daily. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find the stories we talked about on today's podcast linked in the show notes. This podcast, Slash Film Daily, is published every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And please go rate and review the podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends. Spread the word. And we'll see you tomorrow. See, I have not read any of these Shang-Chi comics, and I don't really know much about the character. What I'm wondering is, like, reading these descriptions of the character, it sounds like there's kind of a lot of similarities to, like, Doctor Strange in that there's kind of some, there's Asian influence of, like, this kind of, like, Doctor Strange can also, like, replicate himself, too, right? Like, he did that in Infinity War, and then Thanos was able to knock him out of it, so I'm wondering, like, how do you make...
I don't think that Doctor Strange can duplicate himself in the same way, though. I think Doctor Strange can create projections of himself, but those projections don't have a physical presence.
Oh, they're not real. They're just like...
Yeah, because when he did that, it was kind of as a way to, like, distract Thanos so that he couldn't figure out which one was the real him.
Okay, I'm going to have to read some Shang-Chi comics on my Marvel Unlimited app.